So my name is Kennedy Munene. I'm going to be taking you through database design with the MySQL. When we are building dynamic websites, you have to understand that their content change over time. And the content is also customized to individual users. And because of that, what you're going to require is a web server, which now hosts that content that is going to be changing over time. And also we're going to be having a database. The database stores the users' information or the content that is going to be changing over time. So for us to do this, we need the content to be programmatically generated. And this one can be based on file system, or at the same time, it can be based on a database. When you're setting up a database-driven website, one is that you need to set up a MySQL database server. There are different databases that you can consider, but for this particular training, we are going to be considering MySQL database server. You also need to set up Apache, which is a web server. Then for the server-side scripting, we are going to set up PHP, which is going to be used to manipulate any forms that we are going to have created. Then also we are going to create a simple web-enabled database. So that will be the application through which the user is going to be accessing the database. A database is simply a collection of data. Then we have a relational database, which has the data organized into tables. So as you can see there, we have an entity. So the entity in this case is a student, and this student has some what we call attributes. So the attributes for this student is something like a student ID. The student also has a name. We also have what the student is majoring in, and also we have the grades that the student gets. The other thing to note is that for each of the attributes, you can get the values. Like for the student ID, we have the values of 101, and we also have the values of 102, 103, and you can have as many other values. So this is a way of having a database which is now stores data in tables. Something to note is that a database has what we call rows, and it also has what we call, like you can see, this is a row, and the row is also called a record. So that row or that record mainly consists of data that is related. Then we have columns. The columns are what we call the fields, and they contain a specific information on that particular record. A database management system is a software that is used to maintain and utilize the collection of data. So an example is Oracle, DB2, and MySQL. Our interest in this case will be MySQL. If we have a database system, we are going to be having users. These users are going to access an application, or what we are calling the database application. And through this application, which could be a form, they access the database management system. And this database management system is going to deal with all the access to the database. So our interest will be in what we call relational databases. Why relational database? Is because this can break the data in separate tables instead of a single store. This kind of a relationship between the tables will help you to break down what would be long data, and also make it accessing that data to be an easy thing for you. They're also going to be faster, and they are more flexible to access. So an example of a related table, we have a publisher here. We also have a book. We also have author. We have state, and we also have genre. Now, all this information can be put into one table. The problem is going to be that many of the details are going to be repeated many times. Like let's say we have an author. One author can have several other books that are going to have been written. So if we had one table that is containing the name of the author, and it is also giving the details of the book, and it is also giving the publisher information, and it is also giving the state and the genre of that book, then we might have a very long kind of a data. Whenever we, let's say, the author in this case, I'm going to take someone like Derek. So Derek has authored one book. We're going to call it Introduction to Computers. So we are going to give Introduction to Computers, and we give the details of Derek. Also, we give, the state that he's in, and also, let's say the publisher for this book is KLB. Now, let's say in about 1 year to come, Derek publishes another book. Now, the book that is going to publish will be database management systems. And then we also are supposed to give the details of, Derek, and also the publisher, which is KLB. So if this information we are putting in one record, you're going to realize with time, the details of Derek, and that is in terms of his first name, his last name, his birthday, and also the state, probably where he stays, are going to remain the same, but we are going to be repeating it over and over. The same thing with the details of KLB, like their name, their address, which is now the publisher. So with time, you might actually realize if this data is entered by different people, it's going to be a data that is not going to be consistent. The next time, probably Derek is going to write a book, and I have my tables as shown here. I can easily know that what I'm only going to edit will just be the book, because the details of the author, which is Derek, are going to remain the same. The publisher is also going to remain the same, also the state, and even maybe the journal. We wish to maintain a database of student names, IDs, addresses, and any other information about the student. So after some time, we will be updated frequently with new names and information. Then we'll also want to retrieve the data, something like, give me the names of computer studies students who live within Nairobi. So that is something that can also be achieved. We might also want to update the database with new information about the student, which was, not recorded previously. Something like we may want to include their Huduma number. Then we might, so this one becomes now easy when we are using relational databases rather than when we are using what we call a flat file system. Databases are fast and efficient, so they are easier to manage than a file system. With the relational structure being available within the databases, then it becomes very easy to develop them. Then the databases are also multi-user capable. Also, databases have what we call standard-based queries. And in this case, we are going to be using SQL, which is structured query language, to access the databases. MySQL is a database management system. MySQL is also frequently used by PHP and also Perl languages. It has also been used by organizations like Uber, Twitter, Amazon, Netflix, among others. Also, MySQL is open source, which means anyone can use it. Some of the basic operations of MySQL is the create table, insert records. You can load data or retrieve the records. You can update the records. You can delete or even modify table. You can also drop a table or even optimize. Some of the data or the field types that you're going to find, we have characters, and also we have what we call the varchar. So these are just field types for the text. You have the tiny text, you have the text, you have medium or the long text, and all of them, they vary in terms of the size of the characters that they hold. We also have the numeric field types. This is for numbers. It can either be a tiny integer, a small integer. It can also be just an integer. It can be a float or a double or a decimal. We also have the date and the time field types. So for the date, you can see the format for what it's going to be containing. You also have the date time. You also have the timestamp. You have the time, and you have the year. Component of SQL, one is the data definition language, and these are the statements which are going to be used to create, define, or modify data structures and objects that you're going to be using. So we have some of these statements are create, alter, drop, rename, and truncate. Then we also have the data manipulation language, and these are the statements that we are going to be using to manipulate the data which is in the tables of the database. So an example here is a select kind of a statement or a query. We have also insert, we have update, and we have delete. Then we also have what we call data control language. So these are the statements which are going to be to control the permissions or to give and revoke rights to users in the database. So this will be the grant and the revoke statement. And finally, we have the transaction control language. And this is a statement to save and restore changes within a database. So they are mainly used whenever we have used the insert, delete, or update statement. So these statements are commit and rollback. The way to create a database, you use the create database and then the name of the database. After that, you can create a table. We said a database contains tables. So you have created a database. Now within this database, you need to create the tables. So an example is given, which is create table. So this is the create statement for table. So you give the table name. What is the name of the table? And then you give the column specifications. So the example here is that you create a table called student. It has a student ID, and this is an integer. So the data types I had talked about. We also have the name, which is a barker. So these are characters, and it has been given a size of 20. We also have the major that the student is majoring in, and then you have the number of characters for the text, and you have the grade and how many characters they are there. Alter table, then you have the table name, and then the operations that you want to do. So in this case, we are having alter table, so the student, and then we are adding primary key, and this primary key that we are adding, we are setting the student ID, which we had already provided, that is going to be to become our primary key. The way to retrieve, so you use the select statement. So select. In this case, we are selecting the major, we are selecting the grade from the student. So this is the name of the table that we are selecting from, where the name is Shannon. If you go to check on the table where we have Shannon, you can see that the major is BCB and the grade is A. An update statement updates the student table where you're setting the grade to be B, where the name is Shannon. So you can see after that has been done, Shannon will no longer be having the grade as A, but now the grade has been updated as B. We have the delete a record. You identify the table that you want to delete from, and then you have the condition that you need to be satisfied for deletion to take place. You can also drop the table. Everything is going to be deleted from that table. After installing the XAMPP, this is the process of installation after having downloaded it. Then you need to start Apache and MySQL. Apache is the web server. Then MySQL is the database server. After I have installed this, I'm going to go to the PHP my admin, and that's where we are going to do much of the operations. So PHP my admin gives us the graphical user interface for us to do much of the activities that I have mentioned about the tables. You can create the database. So you have an interface for creating the database. After you create your database, then you can create tables with various records and various columns. After you've created those tables, which will be looking like this. So this is an example of a table being created. So it has various fields and the attributes to those fields. An example is an ID, a title, surname, and the first name, and what the data type is going to contain. Like an ID will be an integer, a title will be text, which is in terms of characters. Then we have, if you wanted to insert the data on a record, so an example here is insert customer record. So the way it's going to be is that when you run the query, and we say this one can either be done through the SQL, or you can do it graphically. So you insert something like that, and you can see a data value that has been inserted. You can also select edit a record, so that you can edit a particular record according to what you want it to contain, or maybe if you're setting some other data. So I click on the start Apache, then I also start MySQL. Go to the localhost. PHP my admin. This is the interface you are going to get when you go to PHP my admin. So now you can create as many databases as possible. So we start with creating a database. This is now the graphical user interface I talked about. Instead of having to write many of the codes, you can easily use this to generate what you want. So I'm going to click new, and I'm going to call it my first database. Then I click on create. So these are other databases which have been created, as you can see, all of them here. So I click on I have to select now my database so that I can create now more tables within it. So I click on my database. I can create now several tables. I give the name. So the first one actually is going to be student. The name of the student, the email of the student, and I can have that one as the course. The next thing I want to set probably here, which I can also do here, is I want to make the student ID primary key. So I'm going to select a primary here, so that I change that one as a primary key. So if I was to create this one through SQL, let me preview here, click preview. So this is what I should have written, that create table. So the table is called students. What is given here, my database dot student. This is to show in which database that it is, because we have several databases here. So this one would not have been required if I was just doing it within the selected database. So we have the table is called students, and then it has student ID, which is an integer, and it's not supposed to be null. It has characters, 50 of them, and also you can see we have the primary key being the student ID. Then we also have the name is the other field, and it has is data type. We also have email, which is also have a text type, and we also have course, which is also a character type, or the text type. So I close that and then I save. So now I have my database, and as you can see, my database here has one table which is called students, and it has this table which is given, the structure is given in this. So if I try to browse this, it will not be showing anything. So I just have student ID, the name, the email and the course, but there is nothing that has been placed there. And you can see the query that has been used, that select everything from the student. So I can decide to insert some details on this table. So what I just need to do is to insert, click on the insert, which is one of the menu up here. So I'm given the values that I need to put. So I have the student ID. This one I can give it 120. I have the name. I can call this Mike. I have the email address. So I have mike@gmail.com. And I also have course. So the course here is a, let me call it CS. So I can click on the go. That means it's going to update. So you can see the query that has been used. If I go back to browse, we have one record which is for Mike. It's going to be 125. This is going to be David. This is going to be bm@gmail.com or whichever email you want. And the course here can be BBIT. Then I click on the go once again. You can see now if I go back to browse, I have now two values. If I come to the SQL here, I can also decide to create my own queries, and I'm going to be getting the different kind of data. So what is selected for now is that you select everything from the table student. So this is the name of the table where you give the condition. So below here, you can see there's the select all. There's also select statement. There's insert, there's update, and there's delete, and there's clear the format. So you can use any one of these. If I want to select name, then I need to state which table. So from students, where student ID, which is selected there, is equal to 120. Go. So you can see now what value is given. That we have the name, and the name is Mike. So my query, which I had written select name from the table student, where the student ID is 120, has given me that the name with this kind of ID is Mike. And you can keep writing as many queries as possible. I can even decide now to select, I select name and course. Select name and course from the student, where student ID is equal to 125. That is also another ID which is there. So if I click on the go, you can see we have now the name, and we also have course. So the name is David and the course is BBIT.